The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency forever. What's happening? Benton here, streaming from Bakersfield, California. Been hanging out in a motel. I'm out in my car so as not to disturb whoever may be asleep. And whether by coincidence or because of my presence now, lots of activity around the vehicle. The moment I started talking could be a coincidence. Off the charts numbers of homeless folks here in Bakersfield. They're everywhere. And there was a bit of a heat wave. It seems to have broken in the last few days. But yeah, a bit of a heat wave. Um, so there was a lot of them just posted up, and a lot of these homeless folks posted up in, fellow homeless folks posted up in the shade variously here and there. Shout out to the chat. Not reading comments right now. We will get around to those at some point, I suppose. And this is not a threat or a promise or anything to be held to, but more and more, I'm having difficulty finding the motivation for live streaming at all. And before I forget, folks may wonder what happened with the trip to the Pacific Northwest, since I mentioned being in Bakersfield. Without making a long story, without going into a long story, yeah, the vibes are off. Yeah, that's just wasn't the vibe. So that was a bit of a waste of money, perhaps. Although not necessarily. I certainly was able to assuage, is that the right word? Assuage some of my curiosity about the place, and pretty quickly realized, okay, this is absolutely not the place for me long term. So I might as well go the fuck back to Cali. And then, of course, all of the news with the LA riots, and I just can't be bothered. I really cannot be bothered with any of that. Perhaps I would already be back in LA if not for such foolishness. Who knows? But although some of that is, until I'm in an area long enough for at least some of the folks to recognize me, and in Echo Park, there's certainly folks who recognize me. I was there long enough, but I fit too much of the profile for, who a lot of these people might consider to be the enemy. And if anybody's confused as to, some of these leftists or what many folks call liberals, especially the white guys wandering around in these protests, it's like, yeah, I'm not condoning their behavior. What I'm saying is just trying to live one's life like me, with some testosterone and, just wandering the streets on my own as a white guy, from the perspective of the populace, I fit too many of the profiles for what it's a representation from their perspective of the thing that is, which is the system, the white man, the man, right? The system that's attempting to deport people. And, all of the things that are called fascism and authoritarianism and all of this. It's certainly authoritarianism. It's been authoritarianism my whole life, though. That's the thing. It's not authoritarianism because Democrats exist. That's and I don't want to get too much into the politics. I can already feel myself getting a little angry. And then back to the so-called truth community. How many years has it been of looping around? It's all a distraction. Uh, and prior to the "it's all a distraction" talk, there was now maybe this is me flashing back to the Alex Jones days. There was a lot of talk of and that was me listening to the Alex Jones show every day, actually a day later, so that I could download the podcast in MP3 form and fast forward through the commercials. So the next day I would listen to the Alex Jones show in its entirety every single day for years. Pretty much everything that's happening right now, that's people are making YouTube videos about, and in the YouTube comments about, you know, basically all of the things boomers are blamed for, allowing to happen. And I just read all of this going, yeah, I knew about this 15 years ago. Yeah, absolutely. From listening to the Alex Jones show and watching documentaries and researching on the internet. So the idea that, well, I don't even want to get into the information side of things. Um, so I'm also ahead of the curb, apparently the curb ahead of the curve with trauma and repressed trauma, and just how much of this stagnated low level energies I've carried around my entire adult life. Much of it, although not all of it certainly, but much of it stemming from childhood, and then having undergone this many years long process of first understanding how harmful the repression is to the individual. And bear with me for transitioning topics. I don't mean to jar anybody, but this is actually what I wanted to talk about. I was happy to talk about the things going on in the news cycle until I got to politics and realized immediately how angry it was making me. So, or correctly, how angry it was. I was allowing it to make me. Let's be clear. So back to the repression, and I'm also going to tie this into my recent ideas around, have you ever asked yourself, why does all of society have to be based on business transactions and finance? And I understand the mind will immediately leap to trying to find arenas in which, uh, you know, society or the realm or whatever is based on anything other than business. And that's a waste of time. I've already done the thinking for you. Um, you're wasting one, not you. One is wasting their time and resources. One is wasting one's time and resources by going down that path. It's a waste. Okay. All of society, especially in the United States, is based upon a never ending series of business and financial transactions. And in fact, my young life was structured, and here's where a lot of the repression comes in. The child having been sacrificed to Moloch, a pagan deity, uh, of business, industry, and all of these things, corporatism, everything harmful in society, then put into the what truthers call, right, the public indoctrination centers, um, and everything involved in making me little Benton, right, making the Bentons of the past suitable for employment. What better proof is there that one's life, and let's not even get into solipsism right now, one's life in society, it's, again, success, production, value, contribution. None of that is based in anything, or rather, all of that is totally based in finance, business, profit, spending, consuming. None of this can be argued, folks. Um, and a lot of these things I've been lying to myself about as a cope. But did that sound like a cope? Here's the funny part when people say, Oh, well, that sounds like a cope. How often does one hear that? What I just told you is a cope, but it doesn't sound like a cope. Uh, I would say virtually everything that's not involved with accessing one's own sphere of influence and one's own power center is a cope. I would say anything whatsoever involved in society or any externalities, energies directed externally in this in the present dystopia and the past dystopia and the near future dystopia. Um, yeah, yeah. I kind of lost my point because about five super interesting ideas just leapt into my mind simultaneously. So please have a little patience with Benton here, if you would, on occasion when he loses his train of thought. Like at least, and I'm prone to hyperbole. At least two to three super interesting, fully formed concepts just leapt into my mind. Um, yeah, exactly. Mm. So the cope was what was the cope? Um, was me understanding this, but not being willing to fully accept it. The idea that society being based in business transactions, and how evil to do that to a child. The baby's barely out of its mother, and plans. Immediately the planning starts. At what point does the child start getting jabbed? At what point? Virtually immediately. At what point does the child? Typically, I don't need a bunch of people saying, "Well, not my kids, or not me, or not this." It's 99% of everybody getting jabbed as babies, and moving on to the social security number and the card. When does that happen? I want to say for me it was probably around age 7, although I have no idea when my parents actually got the thing. I don't know. Maybe I was like 10 when they gave it to me. I don't really know. Mm. Uh, Identity as a taxpayer, right? So before many, many years before I had the ability to conceptualize or intellectualize what does it mean to be a taxpayer, legally speaking, at the level of being a citizen, with respect to my fellow citizens, the fellow, the other people in society with me. Like, what does that even mean? Wouldn't, would not a proper society educate the populace about that? And one of the favorite excuses I've noticed of Gen Z and some of the millennials when it comes to finance and their personal finances, especially on like Caleb Hammer, financial audits, is, oh, well, nobody taught us this. It's like, yeah, nobody taught us either. I'm 49 years old. However, since I was born into a time warp in Arkansas, in the Delta, the Mississippi River Delta, we had business math in either sixth grade or the start of junior high. It's hard to remember. Might have been sixth grade. Mm. Which was the basics of how do checking and savings accounts work, how to physically write a check, and just the very, very basics of account. I mean, the most basic, like accounting 101 day one type shit. Right. Now, is that an education for how to conduct one's financial affairs, in a delusory, how have I taken to describing this place, a delusory adversarial realm of business transactions? Vacuous. I think I added vacuous to the start of it. And I know I'm all over the road at the start of this, so thank you for your patience. The royal we shall tie all of this together, or not, or not. Um, and I definitely want to get into the repression talk. It's all pertaining. It's all apropos. Shout out to Mr. Miyagi, who taught me a new use of a word, pertaining. First couple of times I heard him say pertaining, I thought he's using that word wrong. So I looked it up. I said, well, shit, I just didn't realize it could have that meaning. Same thing with solipsism. Also, I did not realize that I've been using solipsism for one specific meaning, and all the other meanings make me look bad for having used solipsism or solipsistic or solipsistically. So Certainly I must atone for that. Hmm. But yeah, the idea of fully accepting that yes, there's nothing about life, and we can say in 2025, it's been my whole life. There's nothing. Now, was I allowed to play as a child? So let's be clear. As an adult, once a person, well, now there is an idea of extended adolescence. When I was, I was going to leave the nest regardless at age 18, whether I wanted to or not. That was never up to me. That was always a certainty. Hey, you got to get out of here, right? And it just was known. Uh, you must leave. Now, in my case, my parents wasted a bunch of money to send me to college. But that's neither here nor there. So after the young person becomes a legal adult, and then some of them are just going to live with their parents forever, presumably until the parents die, and which has already happened. I've seen many episodes of Cops or various body cam videos where it's or just somebody's YouTube testimony where they've more or less lived with their parents most of their lives, and um, now the parent has died or whatever. Although a lot of those folks have left the nest and at least grown up into adults. So let me digress. I'm making too many points, not nearly well enough. So when the day comes that the individual leaves the nest, right, their life at that point is about nothing other than what? Well, distraction, right? So am I now figuring out what is the royal we being distracted from? Okay. In business transactions, there's nothing else um, other than what the person creates for themselves at the level of friendship. But how much of the friendship exposes itself as transactional, you know, which, could be a stand in for the business and the financial transactions. And is it ultimately not necessarily the monetary side of the transactions as the fact that the transactional nature of society in its entirety? Does it matter the type of transaction? Mm. Again, what wouldn't Jesus do? Well, Jesus wouldn't make specific demands of the person who Jesus is healing or teaching or guiding or casting demons out of. And I've noticed this in my own life. I do tend to be, somewhat expecting of certain behaviors from people at times, certainly. And then I correct myself again to miss the mark, right? By not being properly identified within myself at the level of my own true nature. It happens. So all of the damage done because, unbeknownst to me, I was born into this realm. And if somebody had just said, "Hey, man, it's a never-ending series of business transactions, and in the future, the only way for you not to live as a person in poverty, as an impoverished person, is to get as rich as possible, starting right fucking now," I probably would have gotten as rich as possible, starting right fucking then, most likely. But then I do scratch my head as to I'm a little puzzled as to why I'm not fabulously wealthy in the first place, being that I'm such an early adopter of the internet. I knew about Bitcoin before it had any value whatsoever. Realistically speaking, all of these various ways that one could become what financially wealthy. Now, what I am, which is one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, that force can never, it always knows that there's no value. There can never be wealth in anything other than what? My own nature. There's nothing possible that is not one with the nature of what I am one with that can possibly have value. See, so probably I've known this all along on some level and was maybe just more tapped into it. And now it is a convenient way to excuse, but not laziness, because Benton has a long track record of busting his ass. See, so from from the rich person or the wealthy person's perspective, they might call it laziness or incompetence or just a lack of focus or all of these things. How about I value things differently and always have, always will? How about it's different value systems? And then the spiritual attack. Oh, well, let's see if Benton is dumb enough to internalize and to identify with a lack of wealth. What I am can never lack wealth, right? What I am is incapable of lacking anything whatsoever. Now, in the physical realm, which isn't even which is not even strictly speaking a physical realm, but in what seems to be a physical realm, or at least through my own imagination, right? My brain decoding reality via the five senses. Is that not in some way my imagination? Decoding it to where the ground, this car, the steering wheel, it seems solid. Does that doesn't in fact make a material realm, does it? Perhaps I've valued things properly. However, not being guided and taught properly, had I known back then, yes, I absolutely would have structured things in such a way to where I would be able to just live my daily life, outside of the monetary concerns to the best of my ability. There's really realistically no way to guarantee there won't be monetary concerns. Meanwhile, at some point in the very near future, it may be Benton, virtually penniless with almost no possessions, maybe staying at a Skid Row shelter type shit. Um, and again, unable, what Benton is unable, you know, properly identified within myself, unable to experience a lack, right? Once the basic needs are met, what then? Because remember, society's based entirely on a never-ending series of business transactions. So the what then, once the basic needs are met, the what then always gets tied into business. Well, okay, a job, a better job, a career path, an apartment, right? Maybe for certain types of folks, a significant other, children, right? And that's one of the biggest lies of this system. I've finally figured this out for myself without having to experience it. And there are exceptions to this. Many people find fulfillment in many things, including being parents. Many people find fulfillment in managing and operating banking, also, right? Many people find fulfillment in many things, and as I've noted before, many people, upon hearing if their spirit or whatever, many of these entities existing elsewhere, if they once they heard a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business, they want to go into that, right? So the fact that people are able to find fulfillment in these things, does that validate the thing itself? I would say absolutely not. So now that going back into the never-ending series of business transactions, um, what if I've known all along deep down inside myself that I would never value that type of success? And then in some ways, the ultimate narcissism, probably tied back to my own nature. How could I not be arrogant when connected to my own nature, which is, well, the only thing of value here is me. What else has value in this place other than what I am? What else is there of value here? Right? That's not directly related to business, because the mind will immediately go to things that involve a monetary value, a keeping of score in US dollars, right? And I can't say if any of this is a mistake for anybody else. It's that I've busted my ass for 15 plus years to level up and evolve and have at least a couple of different breakthroughs to be able to access these very high levels of thinking. And I want y'all to understand, this is, other than, okay, I'll exempt, well, and there's a person who specifically says that they're not in the community. So of the people who might consider themselves members of the so-called truth community, this is the highest level thinking present, period, end of story. And I'm not listening to the panels. I don't go to those channels. I know for a fact what I've been dropping on this channel is higher level thinking, and much higher level thinking than anything that's been going on in the so-called truth community. It's not even close, y'all. It ain't even close. That's my reward in a dystopia, in a realm in which my parents sacrificed me, hopefully unknowingly, to Moloch. And my whole life, I've allowed way too much of my life to be about business transactions, right? Even while limiting it very much compared to other folks. I didn't put all that time, effort, pain, struggle, strife into getting to this point in my thinking, and in, again, as I've talked about many times, mind, body, spirit. I did not do all of that to then abandon course now or reverse course now. Why? For some discomfort? You know where the majority of my discomfort has been experienced in life? Employment, financial matters. You want to talk about whatever this repression is, right? When we talk about repression and teaching myself many years ago not to repress the new stuff, which means, okay, which all that is a commitment to, however painful, however stressful, however shitty the present moment is, I will deal with it emotionally in the moment. I will process it, and I will not carry it around with me. And for a person who's most likely undiagnosed fake autistic / super high functioning retarded person, that's difficult. That's difficult. Now, after practicing that for so many years, it's not nearly as difficult as it used to be. Right. And it's difficult for anybody, certainly. And repression, surprise, surprise, and maybe this is a key feature of Moloch's machine. The individual certainly has a high capacity for repression. Maybe we ought to define repression before I get too deep into this. Because I tripped myself up with the definition of solipsism recently, I've realized. Repression. Did I fail to bring my water? I thought I was bringing water with me and somehow failed. Oh, well. Okay, the act of repressing. So let's go to repress. To forcefully prevent an upheaval from developing further, right? And I've had a high degree of an ability to do that in my young adult years, very high ability to do that. So to cut to the chase here, I had a full-blown fucking panic attack when I woke up last night at whatever time that was, laying on the floor. And I know for a fact that it's because between I'm actually been smoking some herb, some flower, right? And instead of the vapes, and just, my own, where I'm at in my own, whatever this is, mind, body, and spirit. I guess more correctly, not to poo-poo it, but spending so much time recently, without the fear, the stress, the anxiety, and all of these things, even though I had mitigated it and minimized it and was not repressing it, some of that overhead that was going towards processing those emotions, most of that's now gone because of the recent true knowledge of self, right? And so what I came to realize is that I've been sleeping in a way to relax my tissues in my body as much as possible. And for me specifically, it's thoracic. It's all on it's not all, but it's mostly on my right side. And it's, upper back, upper shoulder, but then some of it goes all the way down into like, the lower, just the musculature, right? Of like the mid back and the upper back, the ribs. So what had happened was, what I've come to understand is the tautness or the tension, and also in the past, whatever, just the polluted, actual toxins and just, inflammation, as a lot of that is left. And then with the intentionally, and part of me staying in this motel was I had this the same thing happened about 4 nights ago, which was, um, and I almost went live the next day because I had a great deal of healing one night. Now, it wasn't via a panic attack, but it was just the release of a lot of that stagnated energies. A lot of the repressed trauma. And trauma is starting to lose its meaning, but harm, right? Because I was not willing to experience the emotional upheaval in the moment. Now, why wasn't I willing to experience the emotional upheaval in the past, especially as a child? It was because I was going along to get along by making everything about me involving itself with these series of business transactions. That's what caused that. And now some family stuff, of course, as a child, certainly with the Jehovah's Witness. But I would argue that the Jehovah's Witnesses side of it is also tied into the never ending series of transactions. And in fact, a lot of these AI thumbnails I'm starting to see, and I never noticed this artistically. I am quite good with aesthetics and artistic styles. I never noticed the style of art of the AI until the LA riots. And now that people are making their own AI thumbnails of, civil unrest, that's the exact same artistic style as the Jehovah's Witnesses use in their publications, especially when I was growing up. So now I know, right? Or now I have a strong hunch. Okay, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society being fully integrated with the rest of the system, including the government, the corporations, it's a corporation itself. Probably when I was a child, the AI was already existing in certain forms, and probably some of that was tried out and tested. And, what do they call this? Focus group, right? Oh well, let's just use the AI to make the art for the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. It's the same fucking style, folks. When I see, especially these boomers like this Red Viking trucker, he had an AI thumbnail. I took one look at that thumbnail. I said, "What the fuck is this?" It says it's Jehovah's Witness. That's a Jehovah's Witness artistic style. It was AI, you know. So I can't speak for y'all, but Benton here was directly inserted into the fucking beast, man. Hey, laugh or cry, and like I say, I'm not going to repress it, so I might as well fake laugh at it. I mean, goodness gracious, what is this? Well, I'm here. I'm telling you what it is. Now, what I'm not doing is offering solutions other than the kingdom of God is within you, right? That's the sort of truth I'm offering. Not truth. That's the sort of copes or solutions I'm offering. Because now it's fear. It's fear. It's fear. Well, back to what we talked about with the Alex Jones stuff. What's the point of learning? Well, what the system is doing, it's based in distraction and fear and manipulation and psychological control. What's the point of understanding all of that intellectually, but then just falling prey to it anyway? Like I see other content creators doing, and out of respect, let's not. I'll not name them here, but now we'll name a particular content creator enslaved by truth and his recent, assuming he's still living, right? The fact that he's disappeared, that's the best possible sign for him as a human, right? What I am, right? What I know myself to be, when properly identified, I recognize, that's the best possible outcome for EBT, enslaved by truth, would be for him to take his leave at least long enough to get his his affairs in order, right? Meanwhile, people selfishly want him back, right? Which is fine, I understand. And he could have said, but could he? See, was EBT free to say, well, I need to clean my life up, I must reform, and I recognize that I'm not able to do that, and continue to carry on with you bozos. I don't mean you, the listener, but to carry on with the truther bozos in this manner. Like, it's got to be one or the other. Is that even a conversation that can be had? And folks will try to say, yeah, oh yeah, we can deal with it. We're your friend, and it's a lie. It's a lie, and people lying to themselves even. Because that's the mirror. Let's hold the mirror up to the other so-called truthers that you can't handle the truthers. Let's hold the mirror up to them and say, this is what you are. Right. And in order for me to be a healthy, functioning, person and at least meet my, and I'm speaking now in the royal we, I'm now royally speaking for EBT, but in a thought experiment, as I imagine these things, right? Nobody who has that level of honesty in their transactional relationships, you know, I mean, come on. It's just not a thing. So he's really, realistically speaking, not free to do that. Meanwhile, Benton here, let me martyr myself. I have almost no friends. I can handle pretty much anything. If my friend told me that, number one, would not be offended. Number two, would not resist. Number three, would not try to change their mind or say, oh, well, you're just going through something. It's a phase. Everything's going to be okay. I have no way of knowing if everything's going to be okay. Now, I do know that everything's going to be okay because it's, when properly identified, that's the only possible outcome, right? That nothing bad can happen when I'm properly identified. That's not even possible, right? But I think y'all understand where I'm taking this with the discourse, you know. Um, and this is where I allowed myself to get so angry with another content creator, Toilet Bowl Earth. Is I heard him whining and crying quite a while back to Provo. And if people don't know who I'm talking about, it doesn't really matter. But these are various personalities in the so-called truth community, a very tiny corner of the internet, of YouTube. And I heard him talking about, just sort of flippantly mentioning the idea that and nobody has friends anymore, or and all of this. And I immediately go to you TBE, not you the listener. TBE is either part of the problem or part of the solution. So I immediately clicked the link or said, hey, can I join the stream or whatever it was? And I was like, hey, man, you're right. Now go find somebody who needs a friend and be their friend. That's the only solution to that. Let me calm down. I'm getting worked up again. That's the only solution. Go find somebody who needs a friend and go be their friend. So from my perspective, it's like, yeah, I might not personally, whatever I had invested in a relationship. So I'm just doing an experiment in my mind. If EBT were to come to me and say, yeah, man, I got to take my leave for a while, I'll see you on the flip side. If I do anything short of tuning into EBT in that moment, right? Actively listening, hearing him out, giving him not what I need, not trying to determine what do I need in the moment, only tuning into what does he need in this moment. That's a friend. Okay. Um, am I capable and willing to do that? Absolutely. Am I going to unknowingly do things that are going to piss people off, annoy the fuck out of them? 100%. Absolutely. It's part of the neurodivergence. I'm capable of strongly offending people and having absolutely no idea that was about to happen. I've done it my whole life. I don't mean to, right? I will apologize once I figure it out, but I'm great in those moments. And I tell men this sometimes when they're going through something. I'm like, hey man, I know this is about to sound ridiculous, and every time I say this, I get laughed at. But hey man, if you ever need to talk, I'm a really good listener, and then I get laughed at yet again. It's this idea of, well, we suffer in silence. But why? Why do you suffer in silence? Because everybody's out here serving Moloch's machine a never-ending series of business and financial transactions, and they don't want to fucking hear it. They want to get back to spending money, making money, putting food on the table, fulfilling whatever role needs to be fulfilled in this moment. They're not available for friendship. They're only available for friendship in the context of a never-ending series of transactions. That ain't friendship. Friendship can't never be involved in a never-ending series of transactions. That ain't possible, folks. So what LARPs as family love, what LARPs as friendship, 99% of the time is nothing of the sort. And I've come to the conclusion that that society, the transactional society, one of its major weapons of manipulation and control used against the populace is this idea of family love. It's, well, I got kids. A big part of people who did not want to go along with the pandemic measures was, well, I got kids. I just have to do. There's things I have to do. Okay, well, you're a slave to your children then. And Larry Benton had a lot of flaws. He never would have been slave to his children. Now, he was slave to how his community perceived him, so that helped him be very, very responsible in many ways as a father. Same with my mom, right? But the love wasn't there. Now I understand people will say, "Oh well, and as a Southerner, the Southern dads don't believe. Maybe within the last couple of generations this has changed, but when I showed up in 1975, Southern culture in its entirety did not believe in the father showing any sort of love or tenderness to the son, especially. That just was not a thing, I can assure you. So I understand many people will hear me say this and say, "Oh well, Benton, it's just he's got an issue because he's bitter because of this and that." No, this is not personal. This is based on my evolution in thinking. Right? I've coped with. Right? I've already dealt with all of that. And in fact, the 4 hour long panic attack, that's because I've already unrepressed so much of whatever I went through, at the level of family life as a child, that there's really none of it's left, you know, and I won't even get into the reasons why, I can point to many things that would validate that. It doesn't need to be validated. It is, it exists. It is, it doesn't need validation. But so what I'm now coming to realize is that, one of the major ways people fit in, one of the major ways people are able to, justify themselves and present themselves, before this realm, again, sacrificing themselves, in each new moment to Moloch, right? A perpetual sacrifice, you know, not not the continuous renewing of the spirit that the Bible might talk about, right? Which again, outside of a biblical or a Christian context, these concepts still hold. Not me worshiping what I am within myself, because remember, this system will tell you, oh, well, self-love, that you can't do that. Benton, you can't be narcissistic and stare at your own reflection, and you can't love yourself in that way. Meanwhile, with social media and selfies and the idea of the scrying mirror and all that, isn't that exactly what society has become? Is the thing that I will be accused of being if I'm willing to just say, yeah, it's the continuous overflowing of my own spirit, the I am, the what I am, right? At the level of true knowledge of self, the continuous overflowing of that spirit within myself, which is worship. Okay, by definition, that is worship. Yeah, I understand that these are loaded terms, and people have been mind controlled and taught and trained to view the concept of worship in a very specific external context. Worship can be anywhere but inside of me, apparently, or more correctly, uh, nothing worthy of worship could ever possibly exist within myself. That's what this system teaches the royal us from day one. And in an inverted society, what better proof is there than that must actually be the opposite? What better way than to look at how strongly this system perpetuates the idea that, well, in fact, a human seems to have this innate, desire and need and ability for worship. That's inside of me, apparently. So the thing that wants to worship is inside of me, and nobody has any problem accepting that. But the thing worthy of worship can never be inside of me. Does that make any sense whatsoever? That's the idea of the lowly, wretched sinner. That's the idea of God loved me so much, but then things happened before I got here, and now I must atone, right? And if I check every little box perfectly, and if I go out here and do what the churches tell me, and uh, they say, hey, you need to you need to imitate Christ to the highest ability of your ability, but meanwhile recognize that you'll never, ever, ever be able to match the output of Jesus. Bullshit. Absolutely, I can match the output of Jesus. Are you crazy? It depends on what time frame you're measuring. What time frame is being measured? Are you talking about the right fucking now? I can absolutely manifest perfectly just as Jesus did in this now. Absolutely, I can. Am I able to do that every single moment for the entirety of my life? No, because it's already too late. because of my past incorrect actions. It's too late. Is it possible for me to, at some point, properly identify in each new moment and to, with 100% accuracy, do that for the rest of my life? I don't know, but I'm about to find out. See, now, would there be a need for a church and Christianity and preachers and church secretaries going? Now I'm watching body cam video where a church secretary is getting arrested for embezzling $550,000 from the church and all of this. See, none of that's necessary or possible, or it's not. That's not a thing. See, my thinking. I'm bragging about my recent thinking. My thinking, right, in a vacuum. Not that the system is scared of my thinking. In a vacuum, if every single person, if enough people were able to install this thinking into their head, right, then that would change things potentially. Because what do I need the church for? The church needs me. The church needs butts in the seats. The church needs a 10% tithe from everybody so that the church secretary has some money to, otherwise there's nothing for her to embezzle. Meanwhile, look at how quickly the royal we, for the purposes of this discussion, is right back into the never-ending series of business transactions. And this discourse is my value, at least in the short term, to this realm or to the people, if indeed, again, setting solipsism to this, the philosophy, let's be specific, setting the philosophy of solipsism to the side, right? This is my value externally, is that maybe someone will be inspired and say, well, if Benton can spend all of those years evolving his thinking, maybe I can do it. Well, then I can do it too, clearly. Now, as a person willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears and being seen as a fucking weirdo, not only not being accepted, being rejected by people, solely based on, again, people that will listen to this and are listening right now, shout out to the chat, shout out to replay crew. They have their own everybody, we all have our own versions of being rejected or not fully accepted or, sort of side-eyed for things we with 100% certainty know to be true, right? Absolutely. But so the major function of Christianity is to, well, I shouldn't say the major function. One of the functions of Christianity is, to deal with the worship side of things, right? So the human seemingly possessed or possessing of a desire to worship, right? Whatever that is. Well, if what I am inside of my sphere of influence, the most super intelligent, and I'm one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit. Isn't that what is referred to when people talk about worshiping God? And then the Bible itself talks about the kingdom of God is within me, and my own innate desire to worship is within me. But what can never be in me is something worthy of being worshipped. Get the fuck out of here. That does not, logically speaking, that simply does not jibe. That don't jibe, y'all. That doesn't, there's no reconciliation. In a series of transactions, right, the ledger must be balanced. That ledger don't balance. So the continuous overflowing of the spirit, and I've forgotten why I got onto the topic of the continuous overflowing of the spirit. I abandoned that thread. My apologies. However, this portion of the discourse seems to be even more important. So that's why, because if I try to put it on the back burner, when I get back to it, I won't have quite the I am emotionally fired to a great extent. So I do need the a bit of the fire and brimstone. So thank you for your patience. Much appreciated. And if I was going to turn this into a business, so I guess eventually, but is this a business? See, what I'm doing here can never become a business and still be what it is right now. Turning it into a business will immediately change it into something of what? That can only be measured in money, right? And I don't mean taking donations. I mean, I'm already thinking like, well, if I had a co-host in a studio and all of this, there could be someone to just there to patiently listen and then make a note every time they see that I'm diverting from the topic, and then, know when to remind me, okay, it's a quiet moment. Hey man, 45 minutes ago,
you were about to get onto this one topic and then remind me, right? Yeah. That would be somebody's job if this was a business. But it's not a business. I'm not a business. These ideas are not a business, and they're not going to be a business. Praise Almighty God in the mighty name of Christ Jesus. Jesus Christ is Lord. If anybody doesn't like to hear that and they're offended, that's fine with me. You know, uh, I interface with those concepts because it works for me. I'm pragmatic and self-centered in that way. I would never, well, I can't even say that, but the system attempted to get me to, it tried very hard to get me to conform based on religious principles, and it did not take, thankfully. Right. It never took. So, that's not going to work for me. Meanwhile, if the religion is, if people can say, well, the religion is it actually serves a function, and I disagree. It serves a function, but it doesn't serve a function for the people. It serves a function for Moloch's machine. But if people want to try to have an idea that the religion is, this is there are good parts of it. It's like, yeah, that's here for me. I wasn't created to serve whatever that is. Presumably that would be the force in society that would say, well, we're not going to allow society to become a never-ending series of business transactions. Wouldn't that be the value of religion to society, to counterbalance the business system? And maybe it did in the past. I have no idea. But I know in the present, religion functions just like everything else, a never-ending series of business transactions. Now, people can say, oh, well, not my church, not my church. That's fine. There's always exceptions to everything. Focusing on the exceptions in a discourse, speaking generally, will never get the royal us anywhere by focusing on the exception. The fact that I must pause my discourse to remind people that, yeah, I understand there are exceptions. So what? So what? What does that have to do with the rate of inflation in dystopia? That's really isn't that what that means? What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Isn't that what that saying means? What does that have to do with the uh how far your money will spend? So when somebody's kind of gone off on a tangent and is making sort of irrelevant points, the fucking dystopia itself has a saying already prepared, which is, what does that have to do with business transactions? That's shit. That's what that means. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I mean, it's right there, folks. It's right there in your face, partner. Now, what you're not able to do is accept fully what's right in your face and then go back to being accepted normally in a society that's entirely based on business transactions. So do you see the counter motivation, right? Do you see the negative motivation? Do you see, oh, we will punish you? Oh, you think you're going to be a truther? We're going to punish you. You will be punished, says the realm. You think you're going to actually live the life of a so-called truther? And then even the idea of speaking truth to power. What power? There is no power. I have access to one power, and it's inside of me. That's it. Now, within myself, it functions as many separated powers, but effectively, that's the only power that exists, and it's within me, within this delusion, right? Because every word I've said for the last 54 minutes, it's all based within a delusion, this realm as delusion, right? Meaning there's nothing here of substance, especially if a philosophy of solipsism is employed. There's simply nothing here of substance verifiably except for me and what's going on inside of me. Now, I may be willing to extend that to other beings, but I'll never truly know what's going on inside of them. Maybe it's varying, maybe it's NPCs of varying sophistication levels. I don't know. Does it really matter? What's the difference from my perspective? It's in the context of a delusion. What's the fucking difference? And I understand people have empathy and a hope station and a certain, sensitivity and also well, I don't want it to be that way. Again, truthers, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with the truther price of, the price of truther tea in China, right? And make no mistake, this is just talking this way. Even if people can't hear my words and can't understand, even if they could hear my words, can't intellectualize what I'm saying, it's very attractive. I got this one fella he can't help but continuously walk near my vehicle as he's collecting cans and bottles. And I'm not mad at him for it. It's attractive to people, right? What does that say? What does that say? What exactly are they? What exactly is attracting them? Now, that is actually further evidence that they are, in fact, again, at the level of Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, that is actually evidence that they may, in fact, be the same thing I am, right? One with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit. So back to the repression and the panic attack, and see, I figured this out many years ago. I began to realize, you know, okay, let me back up. So for many years, I had trouble falling asleep at night because of racing thoughts, right? Which is anxiety, and then also just my overly analytical functions of my brain. I had not quite taught myself to just ignore whatever analysis is going on as I'm trying to fall asleep. Now I pay no mind and just go to sleep. So over many years of practice, meditation, cleaning up the diet somewhat years ago, I no longer I had trouble falling asleep. But I noticed that oftentimes when I first awakened in the morning, racing thoughts, stress, not a panic attack, but, you know, some version of anxiety, right? But only when I first wake up. So what I noticed was the content of the thoughts in that emotional state of anxiety, that all seemed very pressing. It all seemed like things that must be resolved right fucking now. It all seemed very, very important. Except 2 hours later, I would remember the thoughts I was having and no longer being anxious or stressed out or fearful. 2 hours later, I'm able to just look at the content of the thoughts themselves and say, well, none of that is a big deal at all. And it certainly did not match the level of physiological response, right? So that's when I figured out, okay, this is actually the physiology is doing this, and then the brain is spitting out thoughts to match the physiology. And then at a certain point, that sort of becomes its own like closed loop system for a time, and it feeds on itself, right? So this morning when I awakened, I immediately went from relaxed, calm, chilled out. All of the body's tissues were not all, but very high degree of relaxation in those specific tissues I mentioned earlier. Then just like snapping your fingers, panic attack, motherfucking panic attack. Except what has been to an expert level, a nearly expert, well, an expert level with breath work. Well, I know, okay, well, panic attack, who cares? I know what breath work to do at each stage of the panic attack, right? So I just laid there for 4 motherfucking hours and breath worked my way through a panic attack. Now, what was the panic attack? That was Jesus Christ healing me of what? The repressed anxiety attacks, because I was in my 20s and defining myself, falsely identifying myself with a never-ending series of business transactions, trying to make a go of it, right, on a job that was viewed as as a career path type job. And at one point I took myself to the fucking hospital and was having an anxiety attack. And meanwhile, I've had very, very few anxiety attacks in my life. You know why? It turns out I've probably just fucking repressed most of them. You know, a person of strong will just more or less refusing to have the panic attack, right? So that's what my body was like. Okay, Benton, you're telling us to relax these tissues, and then you've sent us the message that, well, you'll just let the we're not going to worry about the fallout. We're going to let we're going to let the mind or whatever handle that. The fallout of that. Um, you know, so that is healing. That's 4 hours of healing. Meanwhile, look at the pain and the struggle involved in that. And the human desire, the moment the panic attack starts, would be to, number one, identify with the validity of any thoughts that were happening. Meanwhile, I was having almost no thoughts. This is the craziest part. Because I caught it so quickly, I caught it before I knew what was happening, before the mind even had time to start generating thoughts to match the panic attack. So the couple of little things that came up in my mind while this was all happening, I just more or less ignored. It's like, well, I know that that's meaningless. Or more correctly, it has the exact same level of meaning it's going to have later on in the day when I'm not having a panic attack. So that's neither here nor there. And then also knowing, and this is where the spiritual surrender comes in. The spiritual surrender side of things is trusting and surrendering myself to understanding that, well, just like what happened 3 or 4 days ago, the end result of this is going to be, I'm going to feel fucking fantastic in my tissues, right? Because whatever I'm going through in this, however, and I also not knowing it's going to take 4 hours, that's a spiritual practice. Just being able to lay on the floor and breathe through a 4-hour panic attack without knowing how fucking long it's going to last. Right. I mean, come on, people. Your average person would have no ability to even do that, because at some point they'd be like, even if they had the capacity to do the breath work and to deal with it and to understand what was happening, at a certain point, it's like, man, am I ever going to get to start my day here? Like, I got shit I need to do, right? But the most important thing for me in that moment, there was nothing more important than, okay, this is trauma, this is pain, this is emotional baggage leaving the body, leaving the energy sphere. Right. I'm going to do whatever I can do to assist this process. And I'm also damn sure not going to let it return. Now, if what I'm talking about, if this is not some version of casting out of wicked spirits, demonic spirits, and unclean spirits, I don't know what is. We're talking about in my actual physical tissues, except, the royal we understand as a community. Not that that's a thing, but it's understood, right? It's understood that kind of lost my point there. Anyway, you already know what I mean, so it doesn't really matter. Bear with me now. I'm getting cruised now. I'm getting scoped out. Probably gonna have to go to the room now. It's is it? Yeah, it's time. We're gonna have to go upstairs. Well, no, it's only 6. We'll continue to be considerate of our neighbors who may be sleeping in. And this is also a form of selfishness, right? What if what if I understood all of this, but then it was also like, okay, Benton, you've got an hour to release this trauma, but then you got to go get the day started, because you got to go out here and serve Moloch's machine a never-ending series of business transactions, right? Which is further proof of what? All of society being based on business and the transacting of business and finance and making rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, right? That is what's happening here. Like it or not, that's what is provably happening here. It's not debatable. That's what is happening. It's what was happening when I arrived. It was what was happening when you arrived, and it's going to continue to happen. It's probably always been that way. So when I say, have you ever asked yourself, why does society have to be based on a never-ending series of business transactions. I would say, well, that's what serves Moloch and Moloch's machine, and antithesis, right? Antithesis. And I would say, furthermore, um, we then would have to ask ourselves, why can't society be based on? It's really to ask, why can't society be based on anything other than a never-ending series of business transactions? Because society could be based on what? Raising people up, teaching humans to never repress, to never go through these negative emotional states, right? As I've taught myself to cope with and deal with all of this constructively, and to accept the healing. Because how can I be healed if I don't accept the healing, right? So to just lay there, do what needs to be done to get 4 hours of powerful healing, right? Again, what I am is one with the healing, right? So is that me healing me? You know, does it work for me to call it Jesus? What does it even matter, right? Do you think my now the relief I'm feeling in my tissues? Do you think that gives a fuck? I doubt it. I doubt it. What's the difference? Now, what's built into the never-ending series of business transactions is what? It's the ability, it's the chance to manipulate and play upon all of humanity's desires, right? The idea of the shadow self, or and all of these psychological manipulations, right? So if society's based upon a society based upon raising healthy individuals who've been taught and instructed how to be as healthy as possible, mind, body, and spirit, society could be based on that. Now people would say, well, how are the roads going to get fixed? How is this going to happen? How is that going to happen? Well, it would happen in a way that would support and benefit the structures that are involved in each new person that arrives here, supporting and enabling and teaching them how to be like the most effective humans possible at the level of mind, body, and spirit. Doing what? If what they are is one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, right? Teaching them about themselves, ultimately, true knowledge of self, the only knowledge of any value whatsoever other than just basic survival, like street smarts, or just the bare basics, right? Except for that, you know so there's solutions to all of this stuff, but the solutions are within me, right? So ultimately, it's supporting the individuals in uh, it's emboldening and empowering the individuals to be able to have the time and the resources and the ability to access all of that within themselves. For what? For the benefit of all of humanity. Because my assertion is that nothing would benefit humanity more than exactly that, than to say, okay, no more society based on business transactions. And now society is going to be based on supporting individuals at the level of mind, body, and spirit, so that they can serve humanity most effectively. It would be humanity serving humanity, and probably that's what it would be were it not humanity serving Moloch's machine of business transactions and finance and corporations and government. So it has to be the way it is. Otherwise, this place that only exists within delusion would probably just immediately disappear. And what would be left would be the one indivisible force. Again, what I am, the indivisible force of love and creation, the highest levels of vibrational frequency possible, a quickening spirit. That's all that would be left, probably. Antithesis will still be there, of course, But that's all that will be left, right? Left, right. That's all that will be left, correct? Which would probably be what? Akin to heaven. If I return back to source, the idea of that's what I believe the Bible means by heavenly Father. No one comes unto source except through Christ consciousness. That's what I believe Jesus is meant in the Bible. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. I believe what's meant there is this is your nature, right? Nobody's getting back to the source that they emanated from, the source from which they came in this delusory state of being a human serving a never-ending series of business transactions. Nobody's leaving the service of business transactions and coming to returning to their own nature within themselves except through Christ consciousness. Makes complete sense to me. I mean, what else do I need to know? Oh, but yeah, but religion says, hey, well, just go back to imitating Christ and trying to be Christ-like. Just please trust, Benton. You'll never ever pull it off. And I'm like, bullshit. Yes, I will. Absolutely, I will. Because we haven't defined a time frame. What's the time frame for being Christ-like? Are you telling me that in a moment I can't be Christ-like? That's bullshit. That is a lie. That's religion lying to you. Now, any individual human, it's clear to see that these people are not, they're not behaving based on if indeed they have the Nancy Pelosi MS-13 spark of divinity, they are not behaving every moment of their life based on being properly identified with that divinity within themselves. If, again, setting aside the philosophy of solipsism for the moment, right? And these are the practices, now probably what appeals to, Benton, what appeal, let's be specific. What appeals to Benton in his performance, because I'm performing, you are performing. Each individual who's not an actual NPC, discrete beings in this realm are giving on a performance before what? I don't know. Maybe before the actual, source itself, right? The I am. I don't know. Right. And much of my performance in the past was, of course, based upon serving a system, based upon a never-ending series of business transactions. And remember, there's no possibility to go, because what I would have wanted to do, the lesser evolved Benton, back in the Alex Jones days, I would have wanted to go out here and tell everybody and try to tell the system itself, well, actually, turns out that everything here is based on a series of business transactions, and that's probably not the best way to serve humanity. Do you think that the system knows that already, folks? The system doesn't need me to go up there and tell it. None of these issues has anything to do with a lack of logic or intellectual knowledge. None of this is caused because people don't fucking know. In fact, I'm here to say anybody with a functioning subconscious knows at the level of symbols, the symbolism is all present day to day in the realm. Everybody knows what the fuck's going on here. And they have to know. Otherwise, how could there ever be a judgment like the Bible says there's going to be? Right. How could that be a thing? And I'm not saying it's a thing. I'm saying it has to be that way. It has to be. It cannot be any other way. Again, back to the brutal application of logic. I'm able to brutally apply this logic, and I'm sitting here feeling nothing other than what I would otherwise be feeling. Yeah, I got some soreness now. I can tell this high level of healing. I'm going to have some soreness, and it's already starting to set in, and that's that good pain, right? That's that good pain. So I understand the knee-jerk idea of, well, okay, let's go out here and appeal to. You're gonna go appeal to Moloch's machine, that thing you were sacrificed. Well, the thing I was apparently sacrificed to as a baby. Oh, let me go appeal to that. So Thesis is now going to, I'm Thesis. Nice to meet you. Let me go appeal to antithesis at the level of, hey man, it's this is harming humanity. How about we do something about this? Right? That's crazy. That's insane. That's insane. Right? Now, for all I know, I'm free to leave this delusion anytime I want. See, I that is the part I don't know. Right? Am I? Can I get out of here? Am I free to go yet? Beam me up. Can I get up out of here? Right? Oh, well, apparently I have to stay for a time. Right? Apparently Benton has to stay here for a time. And now we get into the what is going to sound like a cope, but I don't. It's not my concern because I've already identified at least one thing in the stream that was a cope, but it doesn't sound like a cope. If virtually everything that's going on externally and in the ways I attempt to interact with the external world, if it's all on some level of cope, then what does it matter that something sounds like a cope? Now we're just getting into style points. Who cares, right? Who cares? But you know, if I do just end up penniless with almost no resources, which I've done before, this is nothing new for Benton to have virtually nothing other than maybe some food stamps and whatever resources the local community would deign DEIGN to allow me to have access to, and maybe a bed at a shelter, maybe not, right? And the fact is, I spent so many years with the big hiking backpack, sleeping rough, urban camping and all of this. And a big part of that lifestyle is involved around what? Not getting my shit stolen. And the fact of the matter is, I've simply lost the desire to guard my shit. Like when I look back at that way of life, a big part of me not liking, and I enjoyed it overall, but a big part of what I did not enjoy was always having to concern myself with the safety and security of my objects, right? Again, now we're back to Fight Club. The things I owned me on some level, right? And then and that was very helpful to me because when I first watched that movie was in my living room when me and my first wife shared we had a mortgage in Northwest Arkansas across the street from the JB Hunt headquarters, and we both had what would have been considered career type jobs at the time. Benton going off to work in business casual attire, right? And as I've said before, since I had nice ties left over from the Jehovah's Witness days, why not? Why not put on a tie? I already have one. I know how to tie it. Might as well. Normie as fuck. And then that movie blew my mind in a lot of ways. So I watched it on my own home theater system on a DVD that I bought with my own money. Actually, I think I did one of those Columbia House. Columbia House was doing some sort of DVD club back then. I actually made a profit selling the DVDs on eBay back then. It was kind of crazy because that would have been right around the year 2000, right? Or 99. By the time I sold Fight Club on DVD, that's how long ago I was selling things on eBay. Year 2000, early adopter of all of this stuff, right? My Yahoo email account was 1998, I believe. Just see, I'm a source of fascination in this realm. I'm this guy on this bicycle. He just can't help himself. He has to cruise by every few minutes. He just can't help himself. I'm a source of endless fascination. Human curiosity being what it is. What time is it? I'm gonna have to go to the store pretty soon, so I may have to wrap. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to. I prefer to get in and get out before it gets busy, if possible. But well, now I'm yurting the stream, but I'll linger. I'll linger a bit longer, especially with 24 in the house. Shout out to y'all. Couple will leave now that I said that, but that's okay. And so when you look at, mostly drug addicts, in this, where I'm sitting in my car, a bunch of drug addicts, doing whatever they're doing to get their day started, and, so that they can do their drugs, um, which is fine. That's their choice, whatever. But what is that? What is the daily taking of drugs? That's a never-ending series of business transactions. The multiple people with bags of recycling. Multiple people. Whatever it is that they're doing all day. Already ran into multiple panhandlers. This is all business, and especially with the financial stuff going on. And I'm starting to see 0809 actually referenced here and there. And my research, and again, do your own research. You're free to accept this or not. But as someone who, as a layperson, I researched the financial crisis and all of the conditions that led up to it. I studied it for almost an entire year. That's not an exaggeration. I'm talking about stacks of notebooks, right? Books, news articles, putting the puzzle together. My research indicates that, um, when TARP was passed, when the bailouts were passed, that in fact, at that point, things had gotten so bad that what they called the credit crunch or the credit freeze, which all that is that banks don't trust each other enough to do business with each other. So Bank of America can't trust Citigroup, and, Chase can't trust whoever. They can't trust each other because they all know how fucked up their books are. So what was it that allowed banking to continue to function? Was literally that the biggest banks are all allowed to accept drug money, 100%. It's a known fact. So it was actually the U.S. dollars that continued to flow into banks because of how large the global drug market is. And the at the highest side of retail is the United States of America. So that's the highest retail value for the drugs, the illicit drugs, is North America, or well, specifically the United States. So of course it's not only U.S. banks. Obviously there was many banks that are not in the U.S. involved in this, but that's actually what kept the financial system going, was drug money, right? So, in some ways, I'm beginning to see these addicts as actually, in some ways, these people are victims of not knowing how to live outside of defining themselves within a never ending series of financial transactions. And people, some of which are just rebellious types who, well, okay, I'll go out here and unknowingly serve a never ending series of transactions, but I'm going to do it in the way I choose, right? Almost as a cutting off of the nose despite the face. Now, it's more than that, but that's probably a layer to it. I'm just now realizing, right? So that's still a prison. That's still a prison of one's own making. That's still slavery. And one of the points I wanted to make quite a while back in the stream was about the idea of, I realized a while back in the stream, when I was beginning to explain certain dynamics around, especially worship, if I'm willing to recognize that innate within me is a desire for worship, but then a system teaches me that there can never be anything worthy of worship within me, that's called how to create a slave, folks. That's called how to create a slave that will worship massa. That's what that is to say, okay, there's a component within each, the spark of divinity is the individual, if they are what I am, is imbued with the desire to worship, and also one with what I would say is the only thing worthy of worship. If anything's worthy of worship, it's the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit. That would be the only thing, right? And so a slave system would allow me to pass into a delusory slave system, is what's going to take my innate desire for worship, to use that as currency to serve itself, while simultaneously doing as much as possible to turn off the part of me that will recognize, oh, this thing worthy of worship is actually inside of me. And in fact, it's, from my perspective, it's nowhere but inside of me, you know? It's not to be found in these other people, right? It's not for me to find it within another person. It's for me to find it within me, right? That's the trick, okay? But to worship systems, right? Whether it's, oh well, we'll take their desire to worship, and the system will then direct that towards a church or a religion, and then now we can, if you look at like the Catholic model, well, we can have business and feudalism and all of this, and that's the business side, and then the serfs or whoever, you know part of controlling them will be enslaving them via something they already innately desire to do, which is worship, right? Yeah, that which is again a process of subversion and a lot of lying, right? A lot of being lied to. So in order to feed myself and clothe myself and shelter myself, even so-called truthers will suggest that I go out here and serve this realm of business in order to access those things for myself. And what I'm telling you is that what I am is so far beyond that, right? It's willing to participate, but only in ways that benefits it or other things of value, right? To merely serve as a slave in order to, out of fear or confusion or both, or being lied to. See, that's not good enough. I can't look myself in the mirror and respect myself and say, oh, well, Benton, well, you had to eat, or, well, you had to do this. Absolutely not. I ain't got to do shit but live and die, motherfucker. Shout out to whatever black lady, sassy black lady I heard say that years ago. I ain't got to do shit but live and die in this delusion. Nothing. I don't have to do anything beyond that in basic bodily function. There's nothing I have to do. I'm free to leave everything right here and just wander my happy ass to LA with nothing if I want to. And I will have food. And if I want to sleep indoors, I will have a shelter bed. Right. So tell me again what I have to do. Anyway, I got to get out of here. I'm gonna not not interrupt my schedule further, and the natives are getting restless. So thanks for watching. Bye.